Now, to introduce our lesson today, we actually need to go back in time just a little. How many of you remember... Oops, this is not working, Laura. Oh, there we go. There we go. How many of you remember this song by Dolly Parton, Jolene? It came out in about 1974, and it was really a big hit of hers. A few years later, another song came out. This one is by Kenny Rogers and was called Lucille. At the time, when this song came out, I was in my last year of primary school. I had a crush on a girl in my class whose name was Lucille. And on Friday afternoons in our school, we'd end early, and then we go to Friday afternoon movies. And they had those old reel-to-reel projectors, and they showed movies. Normally it was Batman, or we even had Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. But my crush on Lucille was quite great. I remember sitting in the hall and holding hands with her. But it didn't go much further. I think she liked a guy in high school, and the relationship came to an end. But I remember walking home one afternoon singing the song, "You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. 4 hungry children and a crop in the field. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille." It was a song that just stuck with me. Both of these songs are actually songs of betrayal. Dolly Parton's song Jolene was the song. The writer was saying, "Hey Jolene, don't take your love to town. Don't go looking after someone else." And in Kenny Rogers' song Lucille, it was also a song of betrayal, where he was saying, "You picked a fine time to leave me. 4 hungry children and a crop in the field." Both of these songs were songs of betrayal. But there's another song that came out. I think if we go back about 3,000 years ago, there was another song of betrayal that had been written. It's a song that we don't have a title for it, but if we wanted to, we could call it Doeg. Doeg was the main character of this particular song. And by the way, it got quite popular. In fact, it was song number 52 in the ancient Jewish songbook. And next week, we will look at Psalm 52 together. So if you want to, next week, you can start read through that psalm in preparation for next week's lesson. But when I think of Doeg, a few pictures come to mind. I think of him as being the scum of the earth. He was a low-life, good-for-nothing, what I call a flatliner. If you don't know what a flatliner is when you're hooked up to a heart machine and you can see your heartbeat, it goes beep, 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 beep. When that heart stops beating, it's just a flat line. It just goes beep, one long line. He's a flatliner. He had no heart. And we're going to see this, certainly a little bit of this today, and then next week as we look at Psalm 52. Here's a few things that we've been looking at just a bit of a recap of what we've seen on David's life. We've seen a few weeks ago, we saw how David was anointed by Samuel in the presence of his brothers. He was the second person to be anointed as king. Soon after that, though, he entered into King Saul's service. And we saw how he was a liar, played the liar, and he was quite good at that. And at this time when David was anointed, the Spirit of God came on David, but an evil, tormenting spirit came on Saul. And so David would go over there to the palace to play the liar for Saul as this tormenting spirit was on him, and that would kind of soothe him. Not long after this, David had his encounter with Goliath. And we saw the battle that he had where he encountered Goliath, and he said, "God has delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, and God will deliver me from this Philistine." And that's exactly what took place. But shortly after this, David rose up in the ranks. He was put in charge of 1,000 soldiers. And he was really moving up in the ranks. However, one day when they came back from one of the battles, there was another popular song that had gone up on the charts. That song kind of went like this. "Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." I don't know the tune to that song. That's just the way I sing it. But I tell you what, Saul just didn't like that at all. It really irked him. In fact, it rubbed him the wrong way. And the Bible tells us that from that time on, Saul kept an eye on David. He was watching him every move that he was making. I mean, he was thinking to himself, this guy's getting all the glory that belongs to me. And he was trying to plot to get rid of David, to get rid of this young man. In fact, he went so far as to even schemed and plotted and planned. One of his plans was eventually he said, okay, I'll give you my daughter Michal as a bride. You can marry her. But it's come with a price. And so David was told, hey, you need to go and kill 100 Philistines. Well, David went out and he killed 100 Philistines and then some. In fact, he killed 200. And Saul had to then give Michal to David as a wife. And this is where Jonathan stepped in as well, because Saul was out there to get David. He's trying to kill him. He's trying to take his life. And Jonathan steps in and he says, hey, what's happening over here? And he tries to fix things up. And Saul said, look, I won't kill him. I won't harm him. David can come back. And David went back into the service of Saul. But once again, we saw last time how Saul tried to pin him to the wall with a spear. And that night, Saul put out a death warrant saying, I want David dead. He sent men to watch him. And so the next morning they would go and get David and kill him. Well, Michal warned David about this. And we saw last week how she let him out of the window and he made his escape. But now you could say the hunt was on, because Saul was after David. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen something like this flash across your screen when you're watching television. Breaking news. I was watching the news this week and I saw this breaking news came across the screen. Australia, United States and England have got into a partnership and we're going to build submarines together. That was breaking news. Hey, you go back 3,000 years ago and what was the breaking news? The breaking news was David flees from Saul. And he fled to Samuel. You can read about that in chapter 19, verses 18 to 24 there. So the first thing he does as he gets let out of that window, as Michal lets him out, he flees to Samuel. Samuel is now, remember, Samuel's this old judge. He's the one who anointed Saul. He's the one who anointed David. He's an old man by this stage. But David goes to him and he tells him everything that is going on. And before long, Saul finds out about this. He sends some men there, and you can read about the events that take place there. Saul himself actually goes there, and David has to run for his life. And again, he meets up with Jonathan. Chapter 20 there. Jonathan was Saul's oldest son, and also David's best friend. And he asked Jonathan, hey, what's wrong with your dad? You know, he's sent men to arrest me. He's trying to kill me. What am I supposed to do? And Jonathan thinks, you know what? I think you just got this all mixed up. There's something you just got this all messed up. Tell you what, I will go and talk to my dad again, and I'll try and find out. And so Jonathan does that. He goes and talks to his dad, and the end result is Saul throws a spear at Jonathan, and Jonathan realizes, you know what? It's getting really bad. And so he meets with David and tells David, you better run. My dad is actually out to get you. And so David, where does he go? The first place that he goes to seek refuge is he goes to the tabernacle. You think, boy, at the tabernacle you would be safe. And this is really where we pick up our story today, when David is there at the tabernacle. Now, if you have a look over here on the map, you can see on the map, there's Bethlehem down in the south. That's where David was from. David was born there, grew up there. Eventually, later on, Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. Just a little bit north of Bethlehem is a place called Jebus, and that David would eventually capture that and become Jerusalem. But there you can see Nob. A little bit north of that is Gibeah, where it was the capital where Saul was. It wasn't a very big place. It was still a small capital. At this time, Saul's just trying to unite the 12 tribes. But that was his capital. And Ramah up at the top is where David had fled to be with Samuel. So he left Gibeah, fled to Samuel up in Ramah, and now he's fled from there and he's gone down to Nob. And that's where these things take place. And at Nob, he comes in there to the priest, probably the high priest, who is over there in Nob. And this is where we pick up our story today in 1 Samuel chapter 21. We start in verse 1 over here. It says, David went to Nob to Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech trembled when he met him, and he asked, "Why are you alone? Is no one with you?" Now you have to remember something here. David is the number one military person in Israel at this time. I mean, this is the man who killed Goliath. This is the man who went and killed 200 Philistines. What does he want? And you can notice in the text there that as Ahimelech comes out there, he's quite scared. I suspect that maybe Ahimelech has heard what's going on down over there in Gibeah. I mean, not very far away. He's over there. People are coming to the tabernacle daily to offer sacrifices. And so he possibly knows, hey, there's something up between Saul and David. He might not necessarily know everything there, but he knows, hey, there's something that's happening here. And so he asks David, hey, why have you come by yourself? To which David answered Ahimelech, the priest, the king sent me on a mission and said to me, no one is to know anything about this mission that I am sending you on. As for my men, I've told them to meet me at a certain place. Now, it's very likely that David had a handful of men with him at this stage. They're probably hiding out somewhere waiting for David. And David's going over there and he's going to be asking Ahimelech for some bread for himself and for his men. In fact, Jesus talks about this later on in the Gospels, where he mentions where David came searching for some bread from the priests. And we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. But I want you to notice something over here. David is being deceptive. He's lying. And I find what's fascinating about this is when you read what different writers have written, they go to either one of two extremes. You see, you'll have some people saying, hey, let's just call it for what it is. David lied. He said that Saul had sent him on a mission, but he had not. He was running from Saul. David lied. But then you have others on the other hand who say, well, he didn't really lie. He was just being a little bit deceptive because he was trying to protect Ahimelech. And so what's going on over here? Well, I think the answer to this is that we live in a fallen world. And in a fallen world, we're sometimes forced to make a choice between really the lesser of two evils. Let me explain this for us. Even for us as Christians, sometimes we have to make a choice between this one or this one. And sometimes, like I say, less of two evils. If you go back just a chapter or so, when David is fleeing from Saul, you have Saul, and then David has fled from him, and Saul's trying to find him. Well, Jonathan is trying to look at David and trying to help David and try and protect him, but he's also trying to find out just how angry his dad is about David. And how is this relationship repairable? Well, there was a new moon festival, and David's seat was empty. David and Jonathan had made a plan that David was not going to attend the feast. And on the second day, it says this in 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 27. I think I might have this one yet. Don't have that one yet. Sorry, on the second day of the new moon festival, David's place was empty. And Saul said to his son Jonathan, why has the son of Jesse not come either yesterday or today? And Jonathan said, oh yeah, Dad, David came to me and he sought my permission to go to Bethlehem. In Bethlehem, they were having this big sacrifice, and his brothers requested him to be over there for the sacrifice, and so I gave him permission to go. Now, if you know anything about the text, this is not the truth. Jonathan is being deceptive. in order to figure out, is his dad really angry or not? And this is where Saul throws the spear at Jonathan. And so yes, Jonathan was being deceptive. And one of the things you find is that sometimes you have to make a choice between two things. And sometimes the choice isn't always going to be a good one. I've often wondered about this. I've often imagined or wondered what it would be like to live in Germany during the Second World War. Imagine if you're there, you're in Germany, your neighbors are Jews, and you happen to have a good friendship with them, they're your friends, and then you find out about, hey, what's taking place? These Jews are being rounded up, they're being sent to a place to be executed. What would you do? Would you take this family of Jews and hide them in your attic? Would you maybe hide them in your basement to protect them, to look after them and take care of them? Now imagine this. A little bit later, the SS, the Nazis, the Gestapo, someone comes along over there and they knock on your door and they say, hey, have you seen that family of Jews who used to live next door to you here? We're looking for them. Do you have any idea where they are? Now you're a Christian. What are you going to do? Are you going to lie and say, oh, no, I haven't seen them. I don't know where they are. Or you're going to say, oh, I'm a Christian. I can't lie. Yeah, there they are upstairs. Go and get them. You know, and I say that to just say that sometimes we find ourselves in some really, really difficult situations. I often think about this, and I'm sure you've seen this in movies. Have you ever watched a movie where you see policemen working undercover? I mean, they've been deceptive. They have to get in along with the criminals. They have to mix with the drug dealers. They have to mix with the murderers, the thieves. Get in there, live like them, behave like them, so that maybe through this deception and being part of that gang, they can find the kingpin. They can find the guys in charge of things so that they can take them down and have them arrested. I wonder if we often think about how many different jobs there are in our community, in our society, where people are having to be involved in deception in order to make those things work. Not everything is black and white. So I think when we get to David here and his deception with Ahimelech, we need to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt as far as his intentions go. Now let's have a look over here, back to our text in verse 3 and 4. Now then, what do you have at hand? This is what David's saying. Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. The priest answered David, I have no ordinary bread at hand, only the holy bread, provided that the young men have kept themselves from women. Now the law said that only people who are priests could eat that bread. But he said, okay, if you guys have kept yourselves pure, I'll give you this bread. And you're kind of looking at Ahimelech and you're thinking, Ahimelech, the law is very specific. Only the priests can eat the bread. Well, Jesus looks at this in Matthew chapter 12, when the Pharisees condemned his apostles for eating wheat on the Sabbath. In Matthew 12, verse 3 to 7, Jesus answers, says, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. And then Jesus says this, he says, if you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, then you would not have condemned the innocent. The thing we need to understand is mercy always trumps rule keeping. Okay, back to our text. David asked Ahimelech, don't you have a spear or a sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon because the king's mission was urgent. The priest said, well, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah is here. It's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, you can take it. There is no sword here but that one. And David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. Now, this is the scene here. I want you to notice something in verse 7, because in verse 7 we are introduced to this man named Doeg. And it says here there, now one of Saul's attendants or servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. Now, he wasn't a shepherd himself. He was a manager of the shepherds. Here, the text says he was detained there before the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean that he is a spiritual man at all. And we're going to see this next week when we have a look at Psalm 52. You're going to see just what a scumbag this guy was. He was a terrible man. You can see that very, very quickly. But it's very likely that he is over the sheep. He's down there at the tabernacle, because what do they need at the tabernacle? Every day they've got to be offering animal sacrifices. So he's over there, and he sees David while David is there. Now what follows as you read through the text is really a cat and mouse game, where Saul is out there after David and he wants to kill David. And he's getting frustrated. He's fuming. He just can't catch him. That's what it says in chapter 22 and verse 6. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered. Now notice this picture here. Saul was there, seated there, spear in his hand. Wherever he's going, he seems to have the spear. That must have been his weapon of choice. He's thrown it at David 3 times. He's thrown it at his son Jonathan. He's just consumed with violence. He's sitting there, spear in his hand, under a tamarisk tree on the hill at Gibeah, with his officials standing by his side. Now, I want you to notice something here, some points I want us to bring out here as you see Saul's descent into depravity. And if you notice that text that we've just read there, you see him sitting there with his spear in his hand. And you can see where this text is going. So straight away we see the violence that has filled his heart. And we've seen a lot of that already as we're leading up to this, but there's just all this violence in his heart. But not only that, the next verse says this. He said to them, "Listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give you fields and vineyards? Will he make you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds?" And you see over here, it's all about power. But very simply, hey, you want positions of power? Is David going to give you those positions of power? No, if you want power, you've got to come through me. I'm the one who's going to give you that power. But did you notice here that God is completely out of the picture at this point? There's nothing about God in Saul's mind at all. It's all about Saul. It always has been. And we've seen that over the last few weeks. It's all about Saul. But notice what it says in verse 8. Is that why you have conspired against me? Have you ever noticed that when people begin to spiral downwards, that they can't see good in anyone? Look at this. Violence, power, and now conspiracies. Notice this text here. He says, you all conspired against me. This is one big conspiracy that's going on over here. Notice what it carries on in that text. Is that why you've all conspired against me? Not one of you tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son had incited my servant to lie in wait for me as he does today. Not only is it a conspiracy, but look at this. This is a big lie. David's not lying in wait for Saul. Saul's chasing after him. David's on the run. And so his descent now results to lies. In Saul's mind, everyone telling him lies. It's just one great big giant lie. And David is there, he's almost in his mind, David's there, he's ready to pounce on me the moment he gets his chance. But that's not the case at all. David is on the run. He's running for his life, running away from Saul. So Saul's the one who's lying. As I looked at these words, I kind of seen this over here, I just kind of thought, boy, isn't this kind of the things that are happening in our own society today, in our world today? People are getting more and more violent. Even think about with coronavirus. I see a lot of violence in the streets, riots. There's people are hungry for power. There's people thinking all sorts of conspiracies, all sorts of lies. I mean, this is nothing new. Nothing new under the sun. I know that some of these lessons are keying up with some of what the young people are studying in the book of Ecclesiastes. And the things that they've seen in Ecclesiastes that Solomon writes about, hey, these are some of the exact same things that David is going through here. But I wanted to see this here because Doeg is there. And Doeg sees this as his opportunity to move up in political power and in wealth. And so Doeg pounces. He's there, he hears Saul, he sees how depressed Saul is, he sees how Saul is so angry and so in such a dark place. And he realizes, I can grab this opportunity and move up. Look what it says there. But Doeg the Edomite was standing with Saul's officials, said, I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub at Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him, and he also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Almost imagine Saul going, thanks, Doeg, you're a good friend. You're someone I can trust. But Doeg over here, he's just pounced on this. And the sad thing is now that Saul has someone to blame. Look at the next verse here. Then the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and all the men of his family who were priests at Nob, and they all came to the king. Notice Saul here, again, you see the depravity, you see where he's at. Saul said, listen now, son of Ahitub. Yes, my lord, he answered. Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me? You and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and a sword and inquiring of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me as he does today. Again, a big lie. You can just hear his anger in his voice. I love the courage and the bold answer that Ahimelech gives him. Notice this text here. Look at his courage. Ahimelech answered the king, who of all the king's servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? He's your right-hand man. And then he says, was this the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servants or his father's family or your servant, for your servant knows nothing of about all this whole affair. And I love this answer. He's just so bold. He's so brave. But the problem with Saul is, the further you go down into sin, it doesn't make any difference what the reasons are, because you're not listening anyway. And look what Saul says here. Then the king ordered the guards at his side, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David. Now I'll read the rest of this verse in just a second. But look at this. Look how low down he has gotten. And I think, Saul, you have crossed the line. That is the point of no return. You want these men to kill the priests of the Lord, the priests of Yahweh, the priests of God? Are you out of your mind? Look at what it says there. So they knew he was fleeing. He should have told them, look at this. But the king's officials were unwilling to raise a hand and strike the priests of the Lord. No ways, we're not going to do it. We're not going to kill the priests of Yahweh. You could be crazy. You might be the king, but we're not going to do it. Unfortunately, Doeg was there. And so Saul said to Doeg, you do it. Then the king ordered Doeg, you turn and strike down the priests. And this is really sad, but look what it says. So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and women, its children and infants, its cattle and donkeys and sheep. He just went in there and massacred the whole town. I mean, it just blows our mind away. Now I kind of think about when Saul was sent to go and kill the Amalekites. He was told to wipe them out. He didn't wipe them all out. He kept the king alive. He kept all the sheep and the cattle alive. Doeg goes in here. He kills 85 priests. Kills the whole town. Wipes everyone out completely. Well, the text ends, and our lesson ends with this as well. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, I don't know how you say that, Abiathar or Abiathar, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And then look at this here, and this is David's response. And we'll pick up on some of this next week as we look at Psalm 52. Then David said to Abiathar, that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul, I am responsible for the death of your whole family. It's all my fault. Now, David didn't do it. We know that. We've seen it in the text. But something he did, even as he was running away for his life, contributed towards it. Don't we sometimes feel guilty, even though we may not have committed the sin or may not have done something wrong or committed a crime? Sometimes we just feel innocent even because of the actions of others. The last verse is, stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who wants to kill you is trying to kill me too. And you will be safe with me. Why? Because as we saw last week, because God is the fortress of David. God is my fortress. He's the one who's protecting me. He's the one who's going to look after me. He's our fortress out here in the wilderness. Let's end that. He's our fortress out here in the wilderness. Now next week we're going to look at the Psalm 52. I want you to read it during the week if you're able, and we'll be preaching on that next week. I'm going to close off with a song this morning. This is song 778 in our songbooks. It's a song called Be With Me, Lord. And I know that we might not all be familiar with it. If you want, you can sing along at home. If you don't know the song, just look at the words and reflect on these words, because these are, I think the song reflects this well. I know that in our congregation here, we have a lot of people who are hurting, some with finances, some with health issues, some with depression, some with a variety of challenges that we're facing. Some of us are new parents. Some of us are going through all sorts of trials, coronavirus and a variety of things. Just as God was David's fortress, let's sing the song and have God as our fortress, but also thinking about this song here together. And then we'll have our closing prayer. Thanks.
Be with try to take one step alone. I cannot bear the loads of life unaided. I need thy strength to lean myself upon. Be with me, Lord, and then if dangers threaten, if storms of trial burst above my head, if flashing seas leap everywhere about me, they cannot harm or make my heart afraid. Be with me, Lord, no other gift or blessing thou couldst bestow could with this one compare. A constant sense of thy abiding presence where'er I am, to feel that thou art near. Be with me, Lord, when loneliness o'ertakes me, when I must weep amid the fires of pain, and when shall come the hour of my departure for worlds unknown. O Lord, be with me then.
All right, thanks, Tim. If you want to close off in prayer.